So very good morning. Thank you everyone for making it here on this stormy morning. I heard there was a lot of floods, a lot of signs of climate change happening. So good to be here. Um, my name is Dzaeman Dzulkifli, and together with me I have Dr. Riina. Maybe we can introduce ourselves. Dr. Riina first.
Yes, good morning everyone. Selamat pagi. Very nice to see all of you here this morning. So I'm Riina Jalonen. I'm from an organization called Alliance of Bioversity International and CIAT. We are an international research organization. We have an office here in Malaysia and working with national partners, NGOs, communities across the region and across the globe on climate change, environmental conservation, livelihood issues, and so.
And I'm Dzaeman Dzulkifli from Tropical Rainforest Conservation and Research Center. We're a Malaysian-based organization focusing on restoration. We focus on safeguarding endangered species. We have 3 sites across Sabah, Selangor, and Perak. And we are totally a not-for-profit, focusing on safeguarding ecosystem, species, and whatnot. Together with me, we have a few team members. If you can put up your hands so that you guys are familiar with everybody. So everybody reach out to them. Feel free to socialize and chat later or during the breaks, if we have any breaks. So we're going to have a 2-hour session today, and we're going to make it a little bit interactive. So hopefully everybody can ask questions and interrupt us anytime. And also, please participate. We have some surveys up online, on the slides, and we would like everybody to participate as well. Okay? Right. So next slide. So today we're going to talk about what we're going to do. We're going to talk about biodiversity in forest restoration. We'll talk about global standards and different frameworks. We're going to talk about best practices, so what is done in terms of restoration. You wouldn't believe, but there's also such a thing called unsustainable restoration. So we're going to talk about more sustainable restoration and talk about tools. I think that's kind of what most people are here for, to listen about tools and stuff, because as many of you know, it's very time consuming and very labor intensive to carry out restoration work. So what are the tools that can make it more easy so that we can focus on the restoration itself? And then in the end, we're going to just have an open discussion and participations and probably spread out a bit and so on and so forth. Okay? Okay.
Yes, sure. So these are the learning objectives for today's masterclass. So at the end of this session, we hope that you will be able to, first of all, explain why biodiversity matters for forest restoration. Secondly, describe some of the key principles. How do we actually integrate biodiversity considerations in restoration? Thirdly, be able to reference some of the global standards and frameworks regarding how do we do biodiversity mainstreaming in restoration. Next, identify practices and tools, really kind of concrete, actionable things that you could pick up and use in your own activities or your own projects. And finally, would be nice to have a conversation between the participants here and hopefully identify some possible collaboration opportunities, common interests that you could then continue after this session.
Okay, so let's get to know each other. I would like you guys to quickly take off your phones, scan this for some participatory action. We're gonna have a little survey. I'm gonna fill up some forms. Give you about a couple of minutes to do so. Basically getting to know who's in the audience. And Teng right here will beam up the questionnaires. The answers. Coming in. So we have 50 or so people registered. We should get 50 feedback forms. Otherwise, we're gonna go and look at who hasn't answered. Oh, how come? Yeah, they're coming
The answers
in.
are coming in. We just try to put those up on the screen.
Oh. So I can probably read out what's happening. So corporate sustainability and ESGs, we have about 8 people, 9 people. Those from the NGO, we have only 2. That 2 people. It's probably us. Government policy making, 3 people. Okay, that's good. We need everybody in this ecosystem. Academia, we have 1. Forestry and land management, we have 1. And others, we have 8. Interesting. Can we find out who are the others? Who put in others? And I would like to just explain. Yeah. Oh, 1 whole table. Students. Well, what field? Okay. So academia lah. I can put you guys in as academia. Okay, good. Which school? Which university? Very good, very good. They have a field course to one of our sites. Hopefully you guys have get a chance to come out. Okay. Thank you for that participatory action, but we have a lot of ESG components, so that's very good. ESG people, put up your hands. Who's in the ESG side? Great. All right, this will help you guys for kind of like understanding reportings, understanding frameworks, understanding tools that the corporate side will kind of use to report to any global kind of incentives. Yep. So we currently have a little bit of a technical issue, a little bit stuck. We done that. Sure. Can you do the same scan? Okay. So because of the technical issue, we're going to the next question. If you can use the same QR code and go to the next question, is basically what is your current involvement in forest or ecosystem restoration projects? We would like to know what is your involvement. Okay, questions are coming in, answers are coming in.
Sure. So the options are: I manage or implement restoration projects. I provide funding for projects. No funders yet in the room.
I think we do have a funder.
I research or advise on forest restoration. I develop or monitor policies, guidelines, or standards. I'm exploring involvement in forest restoration, and I'm not currently involved. And at the moment, the biggest groups are those who are actually exploring how to get more involved in restoration, and those who are currently not involved, but hopefully getting there when they complete their studies or get new projects. We have 4 people who are involved in implementing actual restoration projects at the moment, so that's also interesting. We'll be able to hear a bit of your experiences, hopefully.
So while we do this technical component, maybe a little bit of show of hands. Who is doing actual restoration? Okay, we got the group over here. We got frame, of course. Perfect. Okay. Is it working? Okay, who else do we have here? Okay, perfect. I'm currently not involved. Those that are not involved, hopefully after this you can be involved. Yeah, but it's good session. Okay, so I think we're skewed mostly towards those that are not involved, but also have components that are for the people who are already doing things and would like to improve their methodologies and their systems. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for that. Okay, we have one more question. Can you guys answer that, please? Basically, what is your biggest challenge now? We do have a funder in here. I think funding is a big challenge. Be a good chance for him to probably promote his program if he's answering the question. Measurements. All right. Funds, definitely. KPIs. Oh, yep. Right now it's all number of trees, right? Who counts number of trees only? Anybody? No? Okay, good. Effectiveness. All right, that's great. All right, it's doing some fancy components. So funding is one of the biggest ones. Excellent. So these tools will actually kind of help raise your profile of your organization by going for international standards And with these international standards, you can actually have a bigger access to funding. So it's really great. Effectiveness, we have different tools as well. We'll share on that later on. Measurement is very important, and new responses. Okay. What else is new? Policies, funds and workforce, multi-stakeholder cooperation. All right. All right. Good, good, good. Thank you for that.
Well, that's really very interesting. So at the end of the session, we'll come back to some of these topics and we'll have discussions how can we approach these things together. So this is good, very good food for thought for that session. Okay, let's start then with a little bit of background on restoration. So we've covered the introductions. Do you want to briefly introduce TRCRC?
Yeah, probably.
There's one slide.
So just one slide on TRCRC. We're a Malaysian-based organization. Conserving biodiversity is our core. So we're not only restoring and stuff like that, we're developing financial models, we're developing how to safeguard new protected areas a little bit. But we see at the core of a lot of these things is the bottleneck on restoration. Everybody wants to carry out restoration now, but what is actually missing is the supply chain. So that's why our kind of living collections and our nurseries and our work is always highlighted the most, because that is where our bottleneck in a lot of restoration is, which Riina will slowly explain a little bit. Sustainable livelihoods is also another component. So a lot of times, you know, when you are in this field, it's not so much of a career opportunity, especially, you know, the younger ones out here. It's very hard to find positions that are this thing. So right now, that is being mainstream. There's a lot of different options, you know, in ESG reporting and all kinds of things, but also in the field. So we try to make these kind of rural jobs a very key focus in our programs. And also key into our programs is how do we assist existing programs, right? So the Centre for Spine Initiative has been going on for a long time. We do not have to recreate the wheel. We do not have to think so hard where to focus it. It's a really good program, and you can just basically try to focus your efforts into what is already developed and try to support developed and already set out programs. So that's a little bit of TRCRC that we do, right?
Okay, and just briefly on Alliance. As I mentioned earlier, we are a global research for development organization. And so our role is to develop methods, tools, and knowledge capacities that other actors can then take up and implement their projects and activities, and that way achieve more results in terms of biodiversity, climate adaptation, mitigation, livelihood benefits, and so on. Next one, please. And as mentioned, we work across the globe. So we have a regional office in Malaysia, in Penang, and are also working in all the other tropical regions. Our organization is part of the CGIAR. I think many of you are familiar with C4 or ICRAF. So they are our sister organization. So they work on all things related to forestry. We work on all things related to biodiversity, how it contributes to livelihoods, climate change, how do we conserve it, how do we restore it, and so. Okay, next one, please. Yes. So, okay, so let's go now to the first topic of the day. Why does biodiversity matter in forest restoration? We have another little poll for you. Okay, can we have that up, please? So the question is, how do you measure, or how would you measure success in forest restoration? Okay, please take a moment to key in your thoughts at the poll. Comes back to the topic of metrics that already came up in the beginning. So how do we measure things? What are the indicators for success? Okay, wow, a lot of thoughts already. Okay, so no challenges in answering the question. So we have things like, okay, having more animals, okay, in the ecosystem. The ecosystems are spatially intact, flora and fauna, soil quality, biodiversity richness, more trees planted, okay? Somebody is looking at that metric also. Carbon credits, number of inhabitants or biodiversity, okay? Area restored versus target, not sure. Okay, hopefully at the end of the session, those who are not sure will have some answers to this question. Increase in native tree species and vegetation cover. Okay, increase in native flora and fauna, fruit trees, increase canopy cover. Okay, proper soil, climate investigation, planting materials, silviculture practices, and so on. Okay, so a lot of ideas there. Here we have already our own system of criteria and indicators for measuring restoration success in Malaysian context. Okay, can we have the next slide, please? So if we look at these questions, actually, in a way, it all comes back to biodiversity. All of those things are somehow dependent on biodiversity, whether it's about species of flora and fauna. It can be about economic benefits that we want to get out of restoration, nutrition or health for local communities or the society, mitigation of climate change, adaptation, ecosystem services like soil conservation or watershed conservation. So all of those things actually depend on the biodiversity components in the restored ecosystem. Next one, please. Carbon is one of the things that is currently being funded. It's a potential opportunity to fund restoration activities, but because of that, actually, we often tend to have a kind of a tunnel vision on carbon. We are very focused on the carbon benefits. It's great, it's a good entry point. It's something that gets people interested and provides opportunities for us to carry out restoration. At the same time, if we are too fixated on just carbon sequestration, we can actually overlook some of the other benefits and can actually have some adverse impacts out of the restoration because of this too narrow focus. Even if we are just concerned about climate change mitigation, that is actually also something that depends on biodiversity. It depends on the productivity of the ecosystem. So the better the trees grow, the more carbon is sequestered. And it depends on the adaptive capacity. So while we are expecting these forests and trees to sequester carbon, at the same time, they also have to be able to adapt to the changing environment, more flooding, more drought, seasons, the patterns are changing, yeah. So the trees have to be able to adapt to all that before they can actually grow well and mitigate climate change. So again, all this comes back to biodiversity. Okay, next one, please. Yes, and so biodiversity actually is the foundation for productivity and resilience. Independent of what are our restoration objectives, biodiversity is something that we need to consider. And at the root of it we have genetic diversity. It's something that we tend to overlook because we think it's kind of a technical concept, and if we think of species conservation, maybe genetic diversity is already taken care of. However, that is actually not the case, okay? We can think that we are conserving species, but we only conserve a few individuals. So this is not an effective way of conservation. So genetic diversity at the foundation is what actually enables survival of the newly planted trees on the restoration sites. So when we do restoration, we want to select the seeds and seedlings and species in such a way that they are already kind of adapted to the conditions on the restoration site. Often it's harsher than the conditions in the forest, so they have to be able to tolerate a little bit drier conditions or different soil conditions, soil compaction, and so on. So that's the first point of where genetic diversity comes in. Secondly, it is indeed the basis for productivity and regeneration. So if we don't have good quality material, highly diverse material, we end up having lower survival, lower germination, slower growth, less productivity in terms of fruits or timber, poor quality of the products. So it underlines all of those aspects of productivity. And finally, it is also again the foundation for adaptive capacity. So genetic diversity is what kind of acts as insurance for the uncertain conditions that we are facing in future. We need to hedge our bets through genetic diversity. Unfortunately, incorporating these diversity considerations in restoration is more difficult than what it sounds. So, for example, here in Malaysia we have a huge diversity of tree species, and so it is not straightforward for restoration actors to choose what are the species that can fulfill the local restoration objectives and are also suitable for the local site conditions. It is already difficult in the current situation, and when we add climate change, that changes the growth conditions, the equation becomes even more difficult. So this is something where we need more knowledge, more guidance, more tools and capacities to help implement this effectively. Secondly, you might know that many of the tree species that are kind of the keystone species in Malaysian tropical forests are actually having quite a difficult, complicated biology. So, for example, the dipterocarp trees, they only fruit and flower every 4 or 5 years, sometimes longer than that. Climate change is again interfering with all that. And when we have the seed collected, it will germinate immediately, and so it's difficult to, it actually can't be stored. We have to propagate those trees immediately. And so this means that we need to plan the supply of seeds and seedlings for restoration projects in a very effective way. Okay. Deforestation is reducing the availability of seeds and seedlings. So as we lose natural forest, we also lose the seed sources that are needed for restoration. It's kind of a paradox. The more we need to restore, the more difficult it is actually to get that material, because we are losing those valuable seed sources. We have done global surveys asking restoration practitioners, first of all, what are the challenges that they have in terms of getting seeds and seedlings for their projects? And secondly, what are the implications of those challenges for implementation of the projects? And you can see here the responses. So actually almost half of the projects said that because of the lack of suitable seeds and seedlings, they are facing a higher than budgeted cost. They are facing delays. And for me, as an ecologist, maybe what is the most severe consequence is that projects end up using different species or less species than what they were initially planning. And that means that actually the objectives of restoration can be compromised. So if we need to use a different species than what are ideal for the site, we don't have the same benefits in terms of carbon sequestration or livelihoods, timber or non-timber forest products. So a lot of challenges there in terms of implementing restoration. So all of this needs effort and planning more than what we are currently doing. However, if we invest a little bit of more time and effort and energy in this and are able to build the capacities in this area, how to select the material for restoration, it will pay back as better productivity and resilience, better attainment of the restoration objectives from the site. So critical things that we need to be looking at. Oops. Okay. Yes. This is also important because of the huge investments that are being made in restoration. So FAO estimate that we need about 30, 40, 50 billion per year to implement the global restoration goals. Of course, we are still far from that target. However, in other regions in Africa and Latin America, where there have been regional restoration initiatives for a few years now, there is actually already a lot of private investment and also development finance that has been pledged specifically for restoration activities. So a couple of years ago, World Resources Institute estimated that it's almost 3 billion of private investments that have gone into restoration. And so it is in our interest to make sure that those investments are used in an effective way and end up or result in restored forest that produce those objectives that we want, whether it's carbon sequestration, whether it's biodiversity conservation, livelihoods. Independent of the objectives, we want to make sure that the funds are used effectively. There are no numbers for Asia for a specific reason. So the other regions had agreed already 5 to 10 years ago that they want to have like a regional program to help mobilize funds for restoration. However, ASEAN and Asian countries have been a little bit behind on that, a little bit wait and see how is this going. And only last year there was a regional program, Result Asia, Launch for Asia, with a target of 100 million hectares of restored area. So hopefully we'll soon have these figures of pledges from private sector also for Asia.
Oh, sorry, Riina.
Yes.
For Malaysia, I just recently saw a slide from UNDP just yesterday at a presentation Shah gave, and I think we're about Biofin. I think is the by UNDP, and it's like 1 billion is required, 1.4 billion is required, and we're probably about 700 to 800 million right now. Is the funding.
Okay.
Okay, 1.4 billion gap. 2.4 billion is what Malaysia is required. We're currently at about 800 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I would say that's not too bad. Way to go still, but I would say that's good progress. So yes, very very interesting to have the numbers always when we talk about money. Okay. So to recap, so when we want to integrate biodiversity benefits in forest restoration, it's of utmost importance that from the outset we decide what is it that we want, what are the goals and objectives of restoration, and how does biodiversity feature in those. We need to use appropriate restoration strategies and approaches to meet those targets. We need to monitor and also disclose how we are doing. This is important to assure our donors. It's also important in terms of learning, because restoration has actually not been done at this scale ever before. And so we are doing a lot of things with a very ambitious scale, with a very ambitious schedule. And so the more we kind of monitor, the more we share and learn from each other, the better we are able to work and implement the projects. And sustainable funding, of course, is needed. Okay. So key takeaways from this section. Biodiversity is the foundation for productivity and resilience. And so it is important in each and every restoration project, independent of what your objectives are. Even if your objectives are not directly related to biodiversity, biodiversity is the foundation. So we often think that biodiversity is like a co-benefit of carbon projects. Actually, carbon is the co-benefit of biodiversity in the projects. It is what enables us to get those carbon and all the other benefits as well. Okay, genetic diversity is a critical component of success for restoration, and if we overlook it, we end up paying more. We have less success in our activities. We face delays. We end up using different species and so on. So it's key to look at this aspect if we want to implement our projects in an effective and cost-efficient way. And finally, selecting the right species and seeds requires effort, especially when we are in a mega-diverse country such as Malaysia. But it will pay back in terms of better success rates in restoration. Okay, so I'll hand over to
before
Dzaeman.
that,
Yes.
please, if you guys have any questions at this point in time, it's a good time to send your questions towards Riina, if there's any. But while you guys think about that, perhaps I can give you a fun fact. Who's in the oil and gas industry over here? Anybody? Do you have anybody? Oh, yeah. Okay. Did you know that we are benefiting from biodiversity during the Carboniferous times? So all the oil and gas that you see right now is an effect of biodiversity. So, we're all linked to biodiversity in a way. Construction organizations, anybody in the construction field? Yeah, okay. Cement as well comes from calcified shells. So we are also dependent on biodiversity. So even though we build really great homes and infrastructure, and we are able to power our our lives through all of these gadgets and motorized vehicles, we're still linked to biodiversity in the end. We cannot remove ourselves from that. So I think that was just a point that I wanted to make on the last slide. Any questions for Riina at this point? Please feel free to put up your hands. We want to make it as interactive as possible. I think the beginning was a lot of setting the baseline. So hopefully most of you are familiar with that components. Is anybody happy with this pace, or do you want a bit more into depth, more details? Just let us know, yeah? Okay. So thank you, Riina, for the first section. We're going now to the second section for something more interesting is the standards. Now we're starting to come up with a lot of different projects all around the world. And as I mentioned earlier, there's such a thing called unsustainable restoration. So the global standards are coming up so that we can drive into certain directions. We don't have to kind of like try to figure it out by ourselves. We have expertise out there that make it free and sometimes available for everyone to look up. So key challenges in biodiversity is, unlike carbon, there's no unified unit for biodiversity. How do you value a tiger versus how do you value a ant? Right? It's very hard to calculate its value. As carbon is basically a carbon unit, and it's quite easily measured by tons. So that's very easy. So that was one of the biggest things. Forestry-based carbon projects in Malaysia, Malaysia include a biodiversity component, but as Riina mentioned, is a core benefit, which actually should be the other way around, right? While we rush to meet zero goals, biodiversity is usually the silent casualty and remains not a high topic in board in high conversations. And a lot of times when we do a lot of these things, we need a multi-pronged approach. So everything that we do needs to complement each other. Because if we only focus on one thing, if something bad happens in case of changes in environment and changes in direction and motivation, it's very hard to reverse. But if we focus on everything equally, it's very hard to develop that drive. Right? So restoration is a multi-billion-dollar global effort. As Riina mentioned, that map earlier on, all the amounts of dollars that are going to that are there. There are different pledges, I would say, across the world focusing on this. So UNDP has one called the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. The Bond Challenge is about challenging areas to be restored. And the key is basically areas, right? So we're looking at hectares of ecosystems, not numbers of individuals, right? That's very important. And then the Global Biodiversity Framework, which was recently signed in Kunming, Montreal, has pledges of areas as well. So a lot of times we're looking at areas and spaces and going away from the individual figure because we're looking at ecosystems. And in Malaysia, we have also different sort of documents and plans that are assisting our direction. So the first one is the 2022 to 2030 National Biodiversity policy, and that has, different overreaching goals. We also have the ASEAN Biodiversity Plan. If you're from an organization from the region, APAC, you can more go towards these sort of regional plans that we have, and sets aside, targets of hectares, again, hectares of ecosystems, and you need to be intact, right? In the corporate world, there are also emerging biodiversity components within the corporate world. Bursa Malaysia, distinct product categories for carbon credits derived from nature-based solutions. So it's separate, right? So when it comes to carbon, you're not competing against, efficiency in energy, but also putting biodiversity in its own kind of category. That's very good. That basically separates the competition amongst different projects because it costs a lot more for a single unit of nature-based solutions for carbon, for example. And then in Bank Negara, we have also a couple of systems, ecosystem protection, and encourages banks to factor in nature-based related risk. And then on the RSPO, anybody in the palm oil sector? Palm oil sector here? Oh yeah. Used to be. Knows this very well, yeah. There's, HCV standards and stuff like that we need to explore more, and buffer zones for riparian zones, which is riverine ecosystems, and that needs to be kind of conserved and restored in certain ways. Not so much at the moment in the RSPO, but hopefully soon. So biodiversity and corporate Malaysia, who should care? Why would you care, right? Basically any business that has a large amount of land, water, or natural resources all depend on biodiversity to supply water. Most of our water, almost all of water comes from terrestrial ecosystems. We don't get our water from the ground, not much, and not at the large scale. Everything comes from reservoirs, and reservoirs are directly linked to forest reserves. We have Shah over here, who was the head of Perak State Parks, which manages a lot of hectareage of water, but is not valued for the water. That site is not valued for water. So ecosystem services that water provides were not taken into consideration. So these are things where biodiversity needs to be valued better, right? And I think there's some interesting talk and discussions between Kedah and Penang about this whole water supply and logging, which we can discuss later. And if whoever that wants to align to international sustainability standards and get access to international financing, there's a lot of different criteria of green, and also very cheap funding available for green projects. So it's becoming very much encouraged around the way. So if you have biodiversity components within your projects, within your initiatives, you get a better chance of going for some of these larger and international funding for cooperation. All right, standards and guidelines, yeah? You know the standards and guidelines for carbon, but now this is standards and guidelines for biodiversity that are also linked to carbon. So we have international principles and standards for the practice of ecological restoration by the Society of Ecological Restoration. You have the CCB standards. You also have now more recently launched in Cali, Colombia last year at the last COP. We have the Global Biodiversity Standards. And we'll talk a little bit about more on the Global Biodiversity Standards, simply because we've been part of it for the last 3 years. So TRCRC, we're a regional hub for the Global Biodiversity Standard. We have 10 assessors within our group to able to carry out and develop projects for you and assist on mentoring and monitoring as well. So these are kind of like nature-based reporting. So there's the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosure. At the moment is at early adoption phase. We have science-based targets for nature, target setting framework. It is also being piloted at different regions and goes beyond emissions, right? So that's important. It includes water, ecosystem degradation, and species loss. So for those that are interested on looking at ecosystem beyond just the carbon component, these are the kind of standards that you would like to be looking for. And then finally, we have the Global Biodiversity Standard, which I'll be talking about a little bit more. This was recently launched and has been adopted by a few things. In the plans of this also is different carbon components. So we're talking to different carbon developing and accreditation organizations, Plan Vivo, Vera. Plan Vivo actually is a partner in this project, but now as it's been launched, we're having discussion with Vera and so on to include it into their standards. So it's emerging as one of the great new standards out there. Okay. Any questions so far? If not, I will continue. Yeah? Please be interactive as much as possible. Yeah, we've got a question at the back.
I actually came in a bit late, but
No problem.
I came in a bit late just now, but I was wondering any way we can view these slides or some from the other lessons later on, from the other lectures, any way we can view it later?
Yep, the organizers will upload it online.
On which web page?
I need to ask the organizers.
Okay.
It will be uploaded in the
WOVA app.
I'll
I
look
heard the WOVA app.
Okay, I'll look.
Yeah. Hopefully we can get a link to this session and also paste it on our socials as well, so that you can have a look. Thank you for that question. Anything else? If not, we can continue. So when we talk about restoration and we talk about biodiversity, there's this really great paper that came out right after or during the pandemic. It's the 10 golden rules of restoration. So the 10 golden rules were kind of like developed by a range of different scientists and researchers, but they all came up with, protect existing forests first. That is your number one goal. We're already seeing biodiversity loss. No point planting something new or restoring new areas when the natural areas are still being disrupted, right? So that is very important. Work together is also a big key component in these rules. We need to work with different stakeholders, different landowners, different sort of industries, different sort of financing mechanisms to be able to develop a concrete goal. So this is why TRCRC, we're normally in these sort of events where we talk to a range of different sort of stakeholders. And it's really nice to see a diverse range of stakeholders in this room. Maximize diversity and to meet multiple goals. So as I mentioned earlier on, there's different goals: watershed protection, safeguarding endangered species, ecosystem services, including the usage of biodiversity. So don't always think about biodiversity restoration as only something that you put aside and set aside as a museum and you cannot touch. There are communities working on that, and there are ways of developing biodiversity rich projects that are also can be used by the community. So extraction, sustainable extraction is also available. I also know that there's also programs where you can actually log forests and you can still get credits of this. So that's called reduced impact logging for carbon, RILC, which has been developed by IUCN, if I'm not mistaken, or FSC. Yeah. So there's different ways. Yeah. Select appropriate areas for restoration. Very key. If you're gonna put your money somewhere, and if you're gonna develop a restoration project, it's nice to put it here in the city, right there. My pointer doesn't work. But the effects that you get if you put it in 1 hectare here versus a 1 hectare in a very narrow corridor goes way beyond, right? This is an isolated area. It's not a bad patch of forest, but you want to basically be spending the same amount of money in a maybe 1 hectare narrow corridor, which connects 50,000 hectares to another 20,000 hectares. That means a lot more than focusing on an area. So that's very important to set appropriate restoration sites. For example, Shah, are you listening? No point restoring on certain ponds and stuff like that. Yeah. Okay. And also next thing is also use natural regeneration where possible. So there's a lot of methodologies out there, right? Familiar yourself with that. It's not necessarily needed to always plant something. If you are right next to a degraded area which has like no grass, no soil, no nothing, it's going to cost you a lot more to plant in this area than it is could cost you to just enhance biodiversity in a degraded forest which is lacking canopy species, for example. So you need to think about that. Do you want to have it for the Instagram, and take pictures in a nice area? Or do you want to have it in an area which is a little bit difficult, not so beautiful, a little bit hard to work in, but actually your benefits are higher? So think about that. You need to think about the costing of some of these areas. And natural regeneration happens as well naturally. So assisted natural regeneration is some methodologies where you actually assist natural regeneration. So there's a lot of different components there. Plant species to maximize biodiversity. So there's different species with different functionality. You need to take into consideration the ecosystem functioning of some of the species. Resilient plant material is very important, ensuring that your ecosystem and can flourish after you plant. So once you plant it, it costs a lot to maintain and measure as well. So you want to be able to plant once and hopefully just look after it for short term, and then after that, let nature do its job. You don't want to forever be having to plant, plan ahead for infrastructure. Long-term planning is important. So make sure you're working with the landowner and making sure that land is secured. For example, we will not plant anywhere, we will not carry out restoration project without 30-year assurance that the area is going to be protected, because it takes a long time for it to be productive. Okay? So in Sabah, our project is for 99 years. In Perak, our projects are 30 plus 30 years. So we need to plan ahead so that nothing changes, right? And make sure you have good legal framework to make sure that site is secured. Without it, changes in direction, changes in in government, and so on and so forth, will change your project as well. So you need to take that into consideration and learn by doing. So what is it? Why is it important by learning by doing? We do not have a silver bullet. We do not have a something that is already out there. We are all in the same boat. Everybody here is in the same sort of section where we're kind of all figuring out. And we go across the world, we talk to different partners in different regions, such as different society for ecological restoration, and everybody is figuring out. So it doesn't mean they are a well 10-year program and stuff like that, but they're all figuring out. So don't be afraid of making mistakes. You'll be able to learn as you do, but make sure you measure it and so that you don't make that same mistake again, and learn from other people. And make it pay. Make sure that whatever you're doing is not for on your own will. You make sure it can be able to generate its own financing properly by itself, by carbon projects, by biodiversity offsets, by everything. So make sure you come up with systems that pay. Okay? Any questions about those 10 golden rules? That paper is free and available. Please look it up. 10 golden rules for restoration. All right. Next, the 10 golden rules then was published, and then the next step was basically how do we then develop a framework or a policy or a standard around that. And so that's where the Global Biodiversity Standard came about, and that basically mirrors the 10 golden rules. Yeah, it applies to the tried and tested expertise. So this was not developed by one organization. This is co-developed by close to about 150 different scientists, supported by IUCN, funded by the Darwin Initiative and UK Aid, and has been going on for 3 years. So it's a very much ground-up developed program, right, from technical expertise from the field, such as the organization us, and we were involved in this development of this as well. It provides a standard and assurance to restoration practices that focus on positive, protecting and restoring and enhancing biodiversity. That's very important because there are other criteria that are mentioned before that could be non-beneficial for biodiversity. So what this does is creates different attributes. We have the recovery wheel, which is called the ecological recovery wheel, and we have different components. And your project is based on those improvements of this, yeah? So when you are developing your project, you might be at number 1. So your species composition might be low, your structural diversity might be at a certain level, your ecosystem function will be certain level, and so on and so forth. Your threats are there. But if you go from like a non-protected area and then you manage to lobby it and get it protected, you're suddenly increasing your level of threat. So these are very measurable components which you can do and carry out, and basically gives you targets and how to go towards the most highest one. So all of these components are easily achievable by restoration projects, and gives you a metrics of calculating it. So the methodology, how do you calculate it, and so on and so forth will be in here. And this is globally set. So these standards are globally developed, but regionally or locally catered, right? So for example, this project has 8 regional hubs across the region. In Africa, there's 2. In India, there's 1. In Southeast Asia, we were the first regional hub for this, so we call this our global biodiversity hubs. And it's growing now to the Philippines and also to Indonesia as well. So the hubs are growing, and we have assessors to come in and help out with accreditation of this program. And then finally, the secretariat will then sign off for the credits when it's certified. So it's very Malaysian focused, it's very Indonesian focused, it's very Philippine focused, but using a international kind of framework and target. Yeah. So the criteria of this is very similar to the 10 golden rules. Select appropriate sites to enhance biodiversity, enhance protection of existing habitats. No point starting new, you're going to be harder. Protect and restore and manage biodiversity in consultation with partnerships and local communities. So it takes into consideration that you need to be engaging or mapping out at least your communities and whoever's there. Aim to maximize biodiversity through ecosystem restoration. avoid, reduce invasive and potentially invasive species, prioritize native and threatened and rare species. You get extra points for that. That's a lot of stuff. And I'm going to talk about some of these good examples after this of what we're doing in Malaysia, for example. Promote biodiversity and adaptive capacity, implement monitoring and evaluation and adaptive management of biodiversity, which Riina will cover components of this in our projects that we're doing, right? So the key takeaways are: understand the local context of your forest restoration projects. There'll be multiple. Involve key stakeholders from early on, right, from the beginning. Don't start your project first and then think about your stakeholders later. A lot of stuff is thought afterwards. A lot of projects that approach us is coming from later on only. So after the fact, start from the beginning. Look out. Spend your time mapping it all out. The key components go beyond beyond carbon. So biodiversity, local communities all play a role, right? All right. Other key learnings for Malaysian corporates, biodiversity is now a material risk and an opportunity. Yeah, with different standards and criteria gaining traction, you need to kind of look into aligning your reporting rules and and accounting for biodiversity. So be prepared. Yeah, you want to be ahead of the game. You do not want to be later on having it as an afterthought, because then it's going to be harder to then change, right? So a lot of times try to see where these trends are going and make the decisions based on that. Okay. Whew. That's a lot of information. Any questions from now? Okay, we have Rati and someone else here. We can have mics and 3 from Frim as well.
Hi.
Yay. Hello.
I noticed your golden rules and the slide before the
yeah.
TGB.
TGBS, yeah.
What I noticed is that there can be more emphasis on regulatory enforcement or involvement. I know that you have worked together there and then involve multiple stakeholders, but probably it might be useful to single out the buy-in from the regulators or the government, because we might do all these things, and in 5 years' time, is the area is de-gazetted, or those sort of thing. I mean, it's just some comment that I just want to point it out there.
So going to the recovery role, I think the threats would be what you're talking about. So gazettement and safeguarding and all of that fall under the threats component, right? It's not only threats from fire, not only physical threats, but also threats to de-gazettement and stuff. So your project will be scored based on that. If your project is not protected or has a weak protection or is not totally protected, you'll be at a very low end, and then you want to work towards that. So every year you are working towards that, and your project can then score. So you have to have a plan. This just gives you a starting point and end point. Before that, you need to have a certified plan, right? So your certified plan will then, for this component, for example, absence of threats, will spell out what you have to do. You have to plan and predict your future threats and how you're going to achieve that. Then you can then appropriately spend the amount for developing relationships with the stakeholders. I hope that answers it. But yeah.
The appropriate involve the regulators or the government, because
right
sometimes because identifying threat is one thing, right? But doing something about it to actually minimize it is another thing.
Right from the beginning.
Right, because you see a lot of mangrove reforestation, all those things. Those are not really protected areas.
No.
But then if you make it a protected area, then you get a buy-in, then you can sort of get enforcement.
Sure. So one example, that we do is actually spend a lot of time developing a project. So even before we start planting a single tree, we're making sure that all of this needs to be in place. So one example that we have is a project here in Selangor, which Rati is involved and Serene over here is involved. And a lot of that time you are spending on gathering that information and gathering that framework to put it into protection. So all of this is baseline. All of this I'm talking about is recovery wheel. This is all great, but this is your guide. This is your baseline. You want to see what is your first stage where you're starting in. And then from there, you can have targets. Yeah. So if you do not know where you start, you do not know where to go, right? So this will help out as your baseline to develop your direction. Yeah. And I think they're really great questions. Thank you for that. I didn't get your name. If you can, guys, if you can introduce your name and where you're from, that would be great.
Haris, currently from Petronas.
Okay. Nice to meet you, Haris. Hopefully we can chat more.
Yeah. Hi, morning, Dzaeman. Very interesting so far. I'm Darawati. I'm from the finance investment side of corporate Malaysia, mainly working with social enterprises and innovative startups. So I think my question relates to some of your comments around measurement and accountability for some of this biodiversity. And it draws me back to the first day where the chairman who did the SE chairman who did the keynote speech, who was formerly, chairman of PwC, he alluded that, nothing much was going on in terms of accounting for climate change and now even, let alone biodiversity. So, and in your last slide, you actually talk about accountability for the impact of biodiversity. So within your community and within all the research and standards that's going on, where does this or what has been done so far in terms of trying to put some numbers down to some of this impact, and working with a sort of accounting side on putting down that into corporate financial statements?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that's a very good question, a very hard component, right? Right now, we are valuing carbon because it's measurable. How do we value the forest for other services it provides? What is the value of a single bee? We know the cost of pollination manually, and then we can work backwards on that and try to figure out, what does it cost. But, we can calculate ecosystem services such as water by liters flow that a forest can provide. And I think we're at a very early stage because I think we're not taking that into consideration when we pay for things, like for example, water that we pay for that comes from reservoir. We're only paying for the water that is processed and is subsidized. We're not paying for what it actually costs to protect that piece of forest. So I think it's very important that we need to basically calculate it first. And some calculations are out there. If I'm not mistaken, I think one of the students, the master students that were visiting us last month, she's carrying out a calculation on that, and this was a calculator that Yale or developed at Yale. So it's starting to take into consideration some of these services, but it's not mainstreamed, right? I think it only be mainstream if we feel the cost. And the moment right now, carbon is being felt as a cost, and that's why it's being calculated. Until we get into droughts, water shortage, then we're going to start talking about water. Until we get into account where we have to go and pollinate every single palm tree in whoever's in the palm oil sector, and because there's no bees, we then start to put a cost on that. But we're saying that it is valued right now. There are some value to it, but it's not at a tipping point, right? So unfortunately, we as humans, if it doesn't affect us, we're just going to carry on with our life. And until it affects us, then we scramble around. So these things have been highlighted by the scientific community quite a bit, but has not been taken and adopted. There are some schemes out there, but they're not mainstream. So it's similar sort of process it has to take. Yeah. So we just need to mainstream it. They are out there, and we can explain to you. But mainstreaming is the next thing. Already carbon is so hard to mainstream because it's up in the air. Yeah. Thank you for that. Very good question. You want to add anything? Some of that? No. Okay. All right. Let's. There's a lot of questions. I'm just checking on time. How many? Okay, we got time. We got 1 hour. No, less than 1 hour. Whoever the mics goes to first. Okay.
Yeah, hi.
Dr. Zainal, very nice, conversation going on here. I'm Dr. Shubha. So yesterday I was in one of the workshop where Mr. Edward from UNDP, Malaysia. So he made a very good comment on the forestry, that I said that now we have technologies which can identify which forest species can absorb more carbon, and there are technologies that now creating impact. Okay, like how which forest area can grow better and which kind of factors we can blend in. So what I find here, like any this recovery will, technology contribution, forestry technology, that might be a good factor. And second one, actually this is I'm taking reference from one of the UN discussion in COP28. I was there. So there was a forum that came, Nature Positive Future, Building with Forest. So there is a discussion on not only forest, deforestation, also creating new forests. Okay, so there is a debate on the timeline, time frame, because these are typical 20, 30, 40 years time horizon. So how do you see like creating new forest? Like a desert is there, and you create a new forest, and forest depletion is there, thinning is happening, and you are creating forest over there. So how fast this new forest can come up? What do you think? What are the examples? What do you see? If you can give a
Thank you. Great question on the technology. So the ecological recovery wheel is basically on the ecological side. If you go to the website, the main article, you can actually download the TGBS manual. And in the TGBS manual, there's a whole component on one whole attribute or one whole chapter focusing on the use of technology. So it is very heavily done, but it's not put on here because these are measurements on the ground. So this is what is done to measure on the ground, but technology is then the tools. So like what we're going to talk about later, Riina is going to talk a lot about technology and some of the really interesting applications that we're developing and web-based tools that we have. So thank you for that. It'll be there. The second question of which is faster, time frame. Yeah, I mean, it depends on your definition of forest, right? What are you defining as? In Malaysia, it's extremely fast. Within 2 years, you can already have a forest cover. If you go to the FAO standard, which is about 5 meters at height and 0.5 hectares in size. So actually, it's very fast to get forest. But then you're talking about the quality of the forest, the diversity compared to its natural ecosystem, right? You need to compare that. Yeah. So it all depends on your goals. What do you want to achieve? Yeah. So that is always very important to try to develop your goals and develop what you want to achieve. All right. Thank you. 2 questions. Yes. Microphones. Oh, you have one. Okay.
Hi, morning. Thank you. Just very quickly, I just wanted to speak to Darawati's question. So biodiversity accounting, as you mentioned, is not mainstream yet, but there are a lot of measurements out there already. And I can share with you one that was done by UNDP on 3 of our Malaysian forest landscapes. And it shows that restoration results in between 2.5 to 3.5 benefits to cost ratio. So you know how forests have always been looked at from a timber yield perspective. Now we have timber yields and conservation yields. So what UNDP project is that they value the timber yields, the timber that you're able to extract, as well as the ecosystem services that's being provided by the forest. So they have a DCF valuation for it and present valuing it to today. And it's positive B2C. And even at Sorry, I'm from Forest Stewardship Council. So FSC also has this thing called Ecosystem Services Procedure, where we verify data and impact for 7 ecosystem services. So carbon capture storage, biodiversity, water, soil, recreation, air quality, and cultural significance as well. So I can also share that with you. Yeah, thanks.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for contributing. It's really great to have this conversation going. FSC is a really great standard and protocol. I really like it. I met some of your partners in Bonn, the Bonn COP last time. So thanks. I think you guys developed the gold standard as well. FSC developed the gold standards. Excellent, excellent. So hopefully we can have a conversation with Charmaine. Yes. Okay. Any one more? Yes, yes. Name and
Hello, okay. Thanks, Dzaeman, for your presentation. I'm Janie from Forest Research Institute of Malaysia. I'm not going to ask any questions. I'm just going to add in some comments based on Frim's experience on restoration. When we're talking about restoration, one of the main keys that we face in our work is getting suitable planting material in big quantities. You know, just like how Riina was talking about dipterocarps and how their flowering and fruiting patterns differ. So this is one of the main things that we need to also look at when we're doing restoration. Secondly is the funding. Usually the funding is enough to plant the tree, but it's not enough for the silvicultural practices or when tending to make sure that the trees survive in very degraded environment. So whoever who is planning to fund should actually look into that for at least for the first few years in order for the establishment of the trees. That's funding. And the part that we have also looked at is that we do a lot of work on mangrove, peat swamps, ex-mining areas. All these are very, very diverse. And the soil types, the microclimatic features, the environment are all very different. Please have a look at this also before you even start your restoration in order for it to be successful. Thank you.
thank you, thank you. From Frim itself, right? Great comments. And it's great. I mean, not so great to hear that seeds are also a very reoccurring kind of issue, right? And when it comes to that, you know, some examples from what we actually did, it actually took us close to about sometimes 5 to 7 years to even get any restoration materials. That's just the seeds from our targeted species. And then after that, to grow them out, takes about 3 years or so to grow them out, and then to plant them. So it takes 10 years almost to plant a tree in the ground. You cannot just walk into a nursery or commercial nursery to get some of these diverse species. One of our colleagues at Bioversity actually did a paper doing a master's on actually the seed supply network systems. I'm not sure whether you have read about it, but it's comparing comparing India, Indonesia, Philippines, and Malaysia in the seed supplies. And Malaysia was actually quite low because we didn't have ecosystem that was gained for that. But we can learn from that, and it's a good baseline. I think now it's gone a little bit further because of our 100 million tree campaign that has been going on. People are getting excited about it. But you're still right. It's a very bottleneck, and it's very opportunity-based approach. Whatever we find, we plant, right? We need to move away from that and have more focused. In our living collection, in our projects that we do, we actually focus on different ecosystems. So in Sabah, we're focusing on lowlands. In Perak, we're focusing on a little bit high. In the urban area, it's urban kind of adaptability kind of scenario. We're looking for peat forest to work with, and we just spoke to some colleagues from Sarawak who are interested to do that. We're also talking to Kinabalu Park, Sabah Parks, to look into mountain species. So you need to gain nurseries, and you need to gain knowledge to all these ecosystems before you do it. And yeah, it's just a lot of work. Yeah, and it needs to be done way before. And when it comes to the funding, that's very important. We actually don't get our funders to come and plant trees straight away. If they want to come and fund us, they need to come and fund the beginning. You know, they need to fund seed collection. They need to fund nursery management. They need to fund all that. And after they committed to that, then your trees will be ready. You know, we cannot, because right now you're just getting the glory of planting the trees, but not taking into consider that. Or you need to pay the correct price of those highly diverse species. So pricing is very important. You need to price it correctly. When it comes to supplies as well, Riina, I think we'll talk about it right now on the components of how do we diversify our supply chain. How do we get different communities, different people, different walks to all be part of this ecosystem so that they can gain they can gain financial livelihood, but also be able to contribute. The minute you have different nurseries in different geographic regions, you're already taking into consideration different species, compositions, and stuff like that. So by working with as much as possible different communities, we'll then get a lot more interesting supply. Yeah. I think Riina, you have a question? Yes. Carry on. Speak for them. Okay. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. I've been just told off to to hurry up. Too much questions. Sorry. Yes. Question from.
Yeah, Benjamin. So I think maybe if we can also have a picture where where conservation is also linked towards restoration, where we also make sure that the supply is available, and also how that links towards a more wider landscape approach for seed restoration and also for conservation of existing forest as well. I think that's very important to understand, because if we do think about restoration, yes, it's an important concept, but how does that link specifically towards a wider scope of conservation? How do we maintain that 54% of forest that we have here in Malaysia, and that contributes towards a wider scope of restoration of places that we need? Also wanted to add that it's very specific to understand how restoration also supports things like species engagements or species ecosystems, because I've come across a lot of projects where we worked with developing corridors for elephants, for example, or enhancing those corridors or improving that. And it also links directly towards how that connects towards palm oil plantations, farmlands, areas where have already been occupied that needs restoration towards a natural landscape as well. So I think that also is very important to consider when we talk about restoration, to have the wider scope of how conservation restoration also involved towards that as well.
Very species focused, actually, if you focus on elephants, a lot of the elephant conservationists will say like, oh, we need to plant more grasslands. But that's only very species focused. You need to think about the whole ecosystem, as you mentioned. Unfortunately, a lot of times, it's only calculated based on one or two different flagship species, and then only focus on that. In this TGBS standards, they are actually, in your baselining, you can actually set your species or group that you want to work with. So if you have more interest in a range of different species, the better it is. And then you can actually set your baseline. You want to restore for birds, you want to restore for insects and stuff like that. And then develop the restoration protocols based on that. So there is some tendency towards going to that, but you're right. It's hard, and we need to basically pitch for it. So when this becomes mainstream, we hopefully that it's calculated a little bit more. So we talks with different companies and stuff to put this into some of their development plans. So if that happens, then at least it'll be easier to for them, the team members from this group, to sell it upwards towards the boards that make the decisions and stuff like this. And I was just having a word with Datin Sunita at breakfast today. We're going to have different sort of conversations with the board level, so that they understand biodiversity as well, not only at our practitioner level or at the sustainability level. So that's all part of mainstreaming, right? So hopefully we can get that done. Okay, no more questions, I hope. Yep. Okay, we can hold it if you have any, and we will move it around. So a lot of times, a lot of the conversations that we had on this is kind of covered in this section, which is basically technical approaches, and then later on toolkits. So plan. Who was talking about planning? You were saying about planning. Select the sites. Make sure your stakeholders are engaged. Capacity as well. Negotiate trade-off. Mobilize financing. Assessing the baselines. Develop a reference model. You gotta take your time planning. Don't jump straight into I want to plant a tree. It's not about planting a tree now. It's about getting towards that section, right? Getting up there. When you implement, you want to implement with by addressing, making sure your drivers for deforestation or degradation are settled. So don't plant a tree there when next year is going to be a prawn farm. You got to make sure it's in a protected area. So even before we even start to plant tree, I mentioned earlier, we need to make sure that we have long-term protection. So in Peninsular Malaysia, it's 30-year gazettement. In Sabah, we have a 99-year MOU with the state government to ensure that it's totally protected. Otherwise, we're going to plant a tree there, a diplo crop grows, and then we change plan, and then we're going to chop it down, and then your whole effort is wasted. Yeah? So assist natural regeneration, I mentioned earlier on. Species seed source selection is very important. We'll talk about that in a bit. And when you monitor, you want to adapt and maintain your results over time. And you say adapt because sometimes things change. You start off first with a restoration project, but then later on it might be, actually the clouded leopards are coming back. Now we're a tiger conservation project now. So you need to monitor as it changes. For example, our project in Sabah has been going on for 10 years now. We're restoring it, and suddenly 2 years ago, pygmy elephants were now residing in our site. We didn't measure that in the beginning. But, try to think about how to measure and adapt things to change. So if they start coming back, do a wildlife conservation component as well. So don't just focus on your trees, focus on the wildlife stuff. So you need to be adaptive. Yeah. And then measure, report, and progress. Very important. So criteria number 6 of the TGBS looks into prioritizing native threatened rare species, and that's what we've been prioritizing since the beginning at TRCRC. Basically, it's a hybrid kind of hub for conservation, which would then expand into kind of seed sourcing materials for the rest of the regions that we work with. It's basically a collection of living stands and an ex situ representative of the wild population. When we collect, every single tree has a GPS location, how they were collected, and so on and so forth. When we plant them out, we're ensuring that when they mature, they'll be able to breed with their own similar sort of species in that ecosystem and provide seeds that are catered to ecosystem that you want to restore. And then later on, when it's time to restore the wider environment, we already have the capability and capacity. Yeah. So defining your target species, right, can vary depending on your stage of where you're at, right? So not always will your climax species be ready for your site. You need to look into the successional stages. Framework species model, for example, is a methodology which actually puts in like a keystone species, like a fig, for example. And when that fig then grows, it then attracts other dispersers. So other species will come in and also disperse. So there's different methodologies on how you want to restore. And they have different methodologies on percentage of fruit trees, percentage of and so on and so forth of the composition of plants. Endangered and threatened species are often targeted by us because of its inability to be able to spread. The threat levels are high because of their distribution and their ability to reproduce as fast. And so when you are setting targets, we're setting targets that we can achieve within the project timeline. So for example, if there's like an endangered tree species that is super endangered, like Vatica cantonensis, for example, that occurs on Bukit Kantan, there was only 50 individuals found in 2014. And then we managed to work there for 2 years with the landowners, and we managed to increase that population from 50 individuals to 1,000 individuals. That's really a huge jump. So then we reported that to IUCN and put it in the red list at its ex situ, and we got an article out on that and things like this. And what we're saying is basically go for targets that you can measure and that you can easily gain your financing and funding for. So yeah, so that's why we are focusing on endangered species, because the threats are higher, right? Okay, information sources. We were talking about information, yeah. Right, do your desktop studies before you get on the ground. Carry out all your, ICU red list, what is relevant for that area, previous reports, what's there, ground truthing, so you're targeting your area before you even start your project. Get to know your local community very well from the beginning. If a local community doesn't want to work with you, spend more time working on that first. If not, find another site if it's really, really not possible. So you want to find the most easiest site to gain your momentum. Because in the beginning, when you start a new project, you don't want to go for the most hardest project and the most complicated project. With the way we work is like with a single landowner. We don't try to work with multiple landowners, for example, simply because then at least there's one stakeholder only. We can just work easier at that. I've seen some other projects we work with state government, with a private concessionaire, with a community, with this thing. And so I told them, guys, good luck. You're going to take at least about 10 years before you even get to an agreement. So try as much as possible to find very practical, easy wins, because there's already so much complications in terms of biodiversity. You don't want to add another human component to it. If you can, just get the momentum first. Yeah. So yeah, government agencies you need to work with definitely on the policy component and alignment on that. Seed sourcing also, is a very important thing. Where your seed's gonna come. Are there people to work in that kind of communities? How long are you gonna spend time to collect them? You want to basically carry out all your kind of desktop studies on where they are. Seed sourcing is going to be now a lot easier thanks to some of the work that we're doing with Bioversity. Riina will share it in a bit. Last known location or whoever has it, and herbarium references will help you on that. And future proofing, you basically want to be able to develop your projects so that they last. One example is, don't use, identical stem cuttings and clones, for example, because one generation and then that's it. They can't reproduce. It is going to be a biodiversity bottleneck. And then what's going to happen is you're going to have to come in and plant it again, right? So you want to be able to develop your projects which are future-proof, so that you don't have to reoccur and coming that, unless you are designed to extract, unless you're just planting a pioneer species which you don't mind it dying out and stuff like that. But as much as possible, try to future-proof it for all of these sort of different risk and different factors. Yep. And traditional knowledge is very important. But translating your scientific knowledge, traditional knowledge, is very time-consuming, and you need to be able to spend time on working that relationships with the different partners, and also that trust. That's very important. The trust, with the communities on the ground. There's so many people coming in and out, offering this bags of rice or cigarettes and all kinds of things, and then just disappear. With this, it takes commitment and it takes long-term collaboration. We do not want projects to come in and start for 3 years, and after the 3 years, the nurseries and the seedlings are abandoned because no one is buying them. So be very careful when developing programs with the communities as well. There's joint decision making, economic participation. They earn a living from it, and also capacity building. Right. So these are different components which we're doing based on like criteria 3 of the TGBS. Yeah. And in the Perak region as well, we've gone out for years before we started our community project, just to get an idea of where they are at the moment and where they're at. So we started right here in the middle on a small site, and now there's a large long-term plan. There's a rancangan khas to be restored over there. We worked with Shah in the back in the day to start up some nurseries out here to get it going. But a lot of times we were very far ahead of times when people were, the framework is not in place. We were testing it out. But now we have a grant from the UK government to basically develop some of these seed supplies so that they can also have a marketplace. So not only just to the NGOs, but also to the wider market. So they can develop their own marketplace and their own ability to stand on themselves. Yep. So these are some of the kind of initiatives that are going out. And this is like the ASTI program that we have. Engaged 70 communities, developing livelihood programs. But the livelihood programs right now are dependent on us. We're going to try to then develop it so that more and more people can be involved. And full-time contract work as well. So they are hired into our workforce. Those that want or are capable of working full-time, they are full-time with us. And then some on a basis of they're available, or when there's high amount of work that are needed, which leaves them to be flexible. We're not intruding in on their lifestyle, on their hunter gathering kind of and forest dwelling lifestyle. We want to basically keep that intact but develop a program which they can also get involved in. So yeah, those are some of the programs that we have. Okay, enough from me. I need a glass of water. I'm going to pass on to Riina for the next component, which are the different toolkits. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dzaeman. That was quite a stretch. Okay, great. So you have just heard from Dzaeman about all this information gathering that needs to happen before restoration can take place. You need to look at all kind of species lists. You need to do interviews, look at research papers, and so on. So it's a huge task, and especially if each and every project needs to do this from scratch on their own. So we are now working together to make this process easier for restoration actors. And one of the things that we are developing together is a tool called Diversity for Restoration. It's a decision support tool that helps actually to choose what are the 3 species that are suitable for your specific restoration site, for your objectives, whatever they are, for your site conditions, whether you are suffering from floods or drought or compacted soils and so on. And also for current and future climate conditions on that site. This tool is actually already online. Our organization has developed it for other regions, countries in Africa and Asia, and Latin America as well. And so we are now in the process of putting this together for Malaysia. The tool takes basically 3 inputs from the user. Number 1, where is your restoration site? Number 2, what are your objectives? Are you interested in non-timber forest products, timber, conservation of wildlife, conservation of endangered tree species, carbon, ecosystem services like watershed conservation and so on. So there is a drop-down menu that you can choose multiple objectives from. And one more input is what are those site conditions that you have, so drought, floods, issues with soil fertility and so on. And based on this input from the user, the tool will then withdraw from our database on species, distributions and traits, information on what are those species that are suitable for your site, for your objectives and for those site conditions under current and future climates. So behind the tool, we try to usually include as many tree species as possible so that there is a like long list of species to choose from. And so for all of those species, we develop habitat niche models or species distribution models based on where do we currently know that the species are found and where else are there similar environmental conditions so that we can predict that those are the locations where the species can survive and thrive. We will also do this for future climate conditions, so that helps to generate maps as you see the colorful map in terms of Shorea macrophylla. So the Engabang species is actually very sensitive to climate change in Borneo. We are developing this tool for Peninsular Malaysia and also for the whole of Borneo, so covering both Malaysian and Kalimantan side. Okay. Currently, we have more than 200 tree species that we are working on based on information from restoration actors, from researchers, also from communities. What are the species that are of interest for restoration for different purposes? Okay. Actually, one of the main bottlenecks for this developing this tool is that we are usually lacking information on tree species. So that is the main bottleneck. We need certain number of like location points where the species is known to occur so that we can model the distributions. And actually for many species, even that basic kind of data is currently missing or it's difficult to access. Okay. The other thing that is behind the tool is a big database of the species traits. So the uses, site suitability, and also specific traits. So here you have 2 examples of different uses that can be selected in the tool in other geographies. Number 1, erosion control, and that is linked to specific functional traits of the species. So if the user selects erosion control as one of the objectives, then the tool will be searching for species that, for example, have superficial roots that are good for controlling erosion. The other example is from silvopastoral systems. So if this is the one that you are interested as an objective for your site, then the tool will search for information on, for example, resprouting capacity after the cattle has been browsing on the trees, a nitrogen fixing capacity, and also the root system should be deeper so that it doesn't interfere as much with any crops or fodder species that you might be growing. So it takes a huge amount of data, and so we are currently working on compiling all that data. Data sharing can be complicated. We hope to demonstrate through this process and through kind of what we have already, that by sharing data, what we have learned from our specific projects and sites on the species that we have been working on. If we share data, if we put all our knowledge together, it actually makes all our lives a lot easier. So we hope that this tool will be inspiring and it will inspire other people to contribute more data to the process and then get more out of the tool. We have a long list of species, so if you are interested in contributing, you are welcome to contact us, ask for the species list and suggest additional species that should be included. If you have data on species distributions or the traits or uses of the species, that is also very helpful. So please reach out if you are interested to collaborate on this. Okay, the other tool that we are developing is a monitoring, reporting and verification tool. It's called My Farm Trees. And the purpose of this tool is that it helps to track the whole supply chain for restoration in terms of where the seeds and seedlings are coming from, where do they go for nurseries, where are they planted, how are they surviving on those planting sites. The tool is actually divided into 3 different components. There is an app for seed collection where you track the seed collection sites, okay? How many seeds, what species, and you pass that information through the tool onto the nursery that is then raising those seeds and seedlings. And when they have the seedlings ready, they pass that information about the origin of the seeds and seedlings on to the people who are using these seedlings then for restoration. And so by using this tool, then we will be able to actually generate knowledge about what is being planted and where, how are different species from different sources surviving on different kind of sites. And so it's a great way of actually accumulating knowledge about what is working for restoration and where. It also helps to improve communication between the actors in the supply chain. So, for example, the local communities who are providing seeds and seedlings, the nurseries, and then the tree planters. So there is a platform in the tool where the actors can communicate with each other. So, for example, if I have a nice fresh batch of Meranti seeds, I can communicate that on the platform, and other users who are interested in finding seeds of those species for their sites can then reach out. Through this app, it's also possible to incentivize specific restoration actions. So, for example, if I, as a donor, I'm interested in, for example, watershed conservation, I can use this tool to call for local actors who are willing to engage in restoration in watershed areas, and then I can provide incentives for them through this tool. Or if I'm interested in like native fruit trees, trees that are useful for wildlife as food sources, I can also call for those species and find the actors who are able to kind of provide that restoration service. So it's a good opportunity for targeting. The tool is based on blockchain technology, so it is at the same time it's transparent and it's also a very secure way of data management. So it's not possible to tamper the data, for example, and it's securely held and available only to the local moderators who are using it. When we first mooted the idea of developing this tool here in Malaysia and using it with local communities, we got a lot of feedback that, oh, okay, that sounds very nice, but it will never work here. However, I'm happy to tell you that this tool, it was first developed in Kenya and Cameroon for kind of farmland restoration with local farmers. And in those countries, we already have almost 7,000 farmers, really rural communities, who are using this tool to monitor all the different steps in restoration action. And they have already planted more than 200,000 seedlings. So if there is will, there is way to make this happen. At the same time, we need to tailor the tool carefully. We need to translate it to local languages. We are looking at how we can make the interface really even more intuitive so that people who are not very literate are able to use it and so on. So it also works for Orang Asli and other communities. Okay. Yeah, you can see here the kind of the workflow of the seed collection app, tracking the trees, generating QR codes for each batch of collection, and then when you take the seeds to nursery, they will read the QR code, and all the information that you have collected from the locations, the number of seeds, the species, the number of parent trees will then be transferred to the nursery and onwards to the planting sites. Okay. We are looking for collaborators who are interested in testing this tool in their own restoration activities. We already have a lot of interest from other countries in Southeast Asia, so we are working on this in Vietnam, Laos, Thailand, Indonesia, and really looking forward to having it tested and piloted here and getting feedback from users so that we can help to make sure that the tool is really relevant and functional in the local restoration context and challenges here in Malaysia. So again, please reach out if this is of interest, and we'll be very happy to share more information. We are going to have a training of trainers to help use this tool and train other people in using it. So hoping and looking forward to expanding this in Malaysia. Okay. Okay. So to wrap up, carbon credit markets have been kind of shaky in the past. However, what we are seeing recently is that demand for high integrity carbon credits is really increasing a lot. A few years ago, 2021, as we can see from here, the share of these high integrity credits in the market was only about 30%. Last year, it was already almost 50%. So if you are going to produce carbon credits, make sure you do it in a highly integrated, high integrity way, so that you have better market opportunities. And so what does high integrity mean? Okay, how does it relate to biodiversity? I think there are two main things, okay? We want to design our carbon projects in such a way that they are really effective in producing the benefits that we are promising out of the restoration. So the careful design of the objectives, what species, what seeds and seedlings are suitable for your site, so that you can optimally sequester carbon or attract wildlife or generate benefits for local communities. That is one key. So the design has to be well thought out and effective. The second thing is, of course, the monitoring and transparency. You want to be able to show that we are delivering what we are promising. So that's also where actually the tools that we are developing now will help with both of these aspects, with the design of highly effective projects and also with the monitoring and transparency and communication of how restoration is being implemented in these projects. Okay. The work that we are doing together with TRCRC is currently funded by the UK government under the project Seed to Tree, Value Chains and Partnerships for Resilient Restored Forest. And overall, the objective of this project is to help improve restoration outcomes in terms of biodiversity, carbon sequestration, and local community and indigenous people's participation in restoration supply chains. The project started last year and will continue for another 2 years. We have 3 target states in Malaysia, Perak, Selangor, and Sabah, for the on-the-ground activities. However, the tools that I explained will be available across Malaysia. And so even if you work in other regions, in other states, you would be able to benefit from those planning and monitoring tools. Okay. So with that, I think that's the end of the presentation. How much time do we have left? 15 minutes. Okay, so not very much time for discussion. What we did with Teng, while Dzaeman was sharing about the standards and practices, we picked up the comments that you provided at the beginning about the key challenges and issues that you had. And so we grouped this into 3 main topics. Measurement, okay? What are the metrics that we use? What are the gaps and challenges that we have? How can we improve this process? Also, beyond the metrics, are there other challenges with the data? With the measurements, for example, how do we manage data? How labor intensive it is, and so on, okay? The next topic was funding. So some of the follow-up thoughts on that. How does biodiversity feature in the donors' goals currently? And how do we connect that with what we want to do, so that we can advance our own objectives as organizations, and at the same time be successful in attracting funding. What are the key selling points that we should be using to help donors get interested in biodiversity mainstreaming in restoration? So some of the points that you made were related to effectiveness of restoration. How effective are we in delivering the benefits of restoration? What are the long-term benefits, and are there other than monetary benefits that we can tap onto? One thing that I would add here is risk. Donors are always interested in risk, okay? They want the most for their money with the least risk. And so biodiversity, again, is our insurance against the unknown conditions in the future. By integrating biodiversity in our activities, we'll be able to mitigate the risks that come with the unknown future. So it's good business, okay? There were also questions of how do we ensure sustainability of funding. And the final topic that Teng and I saw there was related to stakeholder roles and collaboration. So what are the common topics where collaboration between the people in this room would be beneficial, and why? Are there some concrete actions that you can think of already that could be taken together moving forward from here? Who should be at the table? How do we make the playing field level for everyone? Are there some competing interests? What is the role of the different actors, such as government and regulators? So we had thought that maybe there is time for a little group discussion in your table groups for this. I see that that is actually not possible. So maybe we just open for discussion on these topics. Maybe we take first 2-3 comments related to the measurement topic. If there are any questions, comments, thoughts on these guiding questions, or anything else that you would like to share or comment related to how do we measure success in restoration, and especially the role of biodiversity in restoration.
Hi everyone, I'm Aina, a town planner from APDG. This is from a more macro view. I'm quite interested in the 10 golden rule of restoration, right? So the Central Forest Spine project, it highlights our forest being so fragmented. So just wondering, does fragmentation make restoration harder for everyone working on it? Because and is it actually feasible to restore forests in these fragmented areas? Because we see these fragmented areas contributes to all those wildlife conflicts and whatnot. So starting off with the existing forests, maybe is it enough, or we now have to very focus with those fragmented sites as the main issue in our forest restoration? So what's your thought?
Yes, maybe the first consideration is the fragmentation actually makes restoration a lot harder in terms of finding the good quality seeds and seedlings. Okay, so seeds and seedlings from fragmented forest actually suffer often from inbreeding, and so it means that they don't grow well, they don't survive well on the field, and are not so productive. So that is the main challenge. So what we really want to do is to reduce fragmentation through restoration activities, so that the populations of trees and also then all the other living organisms that depend on those ecosystems will be more viable. Yeah, but so at the same time we need to look at the realities in the context of restoration. What are the other things? What are the other land uses in those areas? Where does it make sense to target restoration? And so that's actually a big topic. How do we prioritize areas for restoration?
And when it comes to the Malaysian context, I think there is a different sort of rankings of different complexes and linkages, they call it, which is the areas that they want to connect. So for example, there's a primary linkage where it's just one forest next to another, and the secondary linkage, which is one forest with a bunch of different smaller patches of forest in between. That's a lot more complicated. And I was talking to earlier on, the point that I mentioned is try to minimize your complexity as much as possible to get fast wins. So one area that we want to kind of focus on is where it's just forest, and then maybe just a physical barrier. Sometimes it could be state land, which you need to then convert into a forest reserve. For example, the primary linkage in Perak, for example, previously known as PL2, now it's PL1. APL1, yeah. So that linkage was basically one of the kind of success stories in northern Perak. And in APL1, what they did was they first gazetted the whole area, and then after that included kind of conservation measures, and then have a lot of different wildlife NGOs and us and all that working together to kind of increase the conflicts. And then there's also the physical kind of component where they added viaduct, and then now we have a rancangan khas. So there's a lot of momentum in the area of that. And when it comes to different secondary linkages, it's very hard. You have to work with then different landowners. So if you have a landowner which is more sustainability orientated, it's a lot easier to kind of showcase that they have wins. For example, in Kinabatangan, for example, around the corridors, there's certain palm oil companies that even gave up some of their land to be included into conservation area because of the amount of damages about by wildlife, but also because of flooding and all kinds of things like this. So you need to kind of like take those kind of conditions and considerations. Definitely wildlife conflict will always be quite high. Education and ways to mitigate conflict is some work that some other NGOs do. MEME, for example, does elephant-specific conflict management. And then there's other organizations out there, I can't remember which us. But yeah, it's a big win, connecting forest, fragmented forest, because we can actually see that, you know, some wildlife don't occur. One really good example is in Ampang area, we have a fragmented forest called Bukit Dinding, and then after that, the Ampang Forest Reserve at one side. On Bukit Dinding, you have a huge lack of species. No ground mammals. So usually when you go into a forest reserve, for example, Bukit Kiara and stuff like that, you see no leeches. That's because there's no ground mammals available or to feed on. There's a lot of humans, but there's not enough wildlife that they need because humans can pick them off. But then if you go to across the road, across the MR2 into the Ampang Forest Reserve, there you suddenly get, you know, gibbons and tapirs and everything, and then the biodiversity is huge. And so just a highway and just about 1 kilometer gap between a fragmented forest, the total ecosystem changes. So you need to focus on, you know, rather than restore the island, you want to restore the linkage to the island. So hopefully that touches on some of the topics.
Anyone else? Any other comments? Any topic?
Sorry, just one question. That's to Dr. Dzaeman. Noted that you're working with some deputy to plant IUCN trees across the developments, right? But just wondering whether you got any issues with the local authorities when handing over to them. Just maybe you can share a bit.
Yeah, definitely that's a huge topic, suitability of species, and the local authority will have a list of species that they are interested in, and that is a ongoing process, right? For them to get onboarded on nature species natural species takes a long time, but actually we can learn from very easily our neighbors in Singapore, where they actually are looking at diversity as a huge component. So they have huge targets to increase their biodiversity in urban trees and landscapes, and they have a lot of different guides as well for urban trees that are suitable for streetscapes. For example, the ERT species, Science published Property published a document called basically suitability about, I think there was about 60 different ERT species that are suitable for urban landscaping and describing their form and function as well. But when it comes to this, for the diplocarps and the really big trees, we're focusing in the parks rather than in the streetscapes. In the streets, we're still confined to the hopias and the less massive diplocarps, but in the parks, we can go further. But it also then comes with capacity building. So at the same time of developing the plans, developing the planting materials and the planting plans, we also have to develop the methodology. So it's very important to have good silviculture methodology, because these trees will be different from managing the common cityscape trees. But it's ongoing. So it's not, yeah, I mentioned nothing here is fixed, it's just an ongoing process. So we are learning while we do it.
Hello, my name is Sharetza. I'm from Malaysian Forest Fund. So basically, I just want to say that we have to start thinking beyond planting. So what we've been doing so far, all this CSR, all these projects that we're doing, we're just planting. So we have to bring it up to the value chain. It's just not planting anymore, it's restoration with a purpose. So if you want to talk about funding, which we are the body that looks for funding, we don't give money out, yeah? But we look for money to fund projects. Your project design is very important. You have to be very clear the purpose of your project design. If it's just to restore ecological systems and bring back biodiversity, then you really have to put all those components in to meet that. If you are just doing it for the number of trees that you want to plant, then your impact will be very, very smaller. I'm not saying it's not important, but my concern here is a lot of project proponents. You see, so you have a project that is run by project proponents. It could be NGO, it could be some organization, it could be community. And then the funders, which are mostly corporate and philanthropy and CSR, is the one that's going to give you the money. But the problem is, at the project proponent, if you are thinking to become a project proponent, then you have to build your capacity. You really have. You have to attend classes like this. Then you probably have to go to TRCRC and go into their course. Get yourself really ready in terms of capacity before you even think about undertaking projects. If it's just small plots and you're just thinking of planting, then maybe. But what we want to achieve here is high value impact in terms of the activities that you want to do. So I hope the TRCRC can expand in some ways to look into capacity building of all these NGOs, local communities, and whoever else that wants to do project proponent. In MFF, for example, just for planting alone, we have over 80 sites identified. We have currently more than 22 project proponents, but as Dzaeman is on our advisory board, we find that project proponents do not have the capacity. They can't deliver, and their project design is very poor. So we need to up that, And lastly is I like what you guys are doing, which is looking beyond additionality. Yes, we talk about carbon and all that, but when you talk about carbon, they don't put high value in terms of intact forests. They don't put high value in terms of anything, anything that has already been protected or forest that is standing, because there's supposedly no additionality. But we have to push the agenda of biodiversity, even being bigger than additionality, So carbon is one section. Anybody wants to do carbon, fine. But then we have to look beyond the additionality.
Thanks, that's a really valuable comment. Excellent tips there for anyone who is looking for funding, and we saw that many people are. You talked about capacity building for restoration actors. I wanted to ask, what do you think about the capacity of the donors in terms of understanding biodiversity considerations? Is it something that they are already well versed of and looking into, or is there something that could be done also in terms of capacity in that area? Thank you.
Okay, so far, the answer is no. They don't have the capacity. That's the short answer, right? Unless they have very strong people like in Sime Darby, that really understands sustainability and invest into the people that can understand what the corporate needs. Mostly no, but this is where I'm not trying to plug MFF here, but this is why we developed the FCC, the Forest Conservation Certificate. So the certificate is, if you are a project proponent, you want your project to be registered under FCC. So, but we have our protocols and criteria that you have to meet. Not everyone. Dr. Dzaeman is one of the people that assess our projects, and quite a bit get thrown out the window. But the point is, you want your projects to be monitored, reported, and verified by third party, so that you are certified that your projects follow your design and move towards all the activities that is stated in the project. So then you are certified. So that is the higher value proposition in terms of your project. Project donors prior to now are just giving money for you to replant, but they are getting smarter for their ESG reporting. Where they put their money, they want certifiable projects. So for project proponents, you have to look for schemes or programs that is certifiable, such as FCC, and then you have to build your capacity to meet that. Why I'm here is because I'm looking at the biodiversity assessment component that we want to integrate into our verification module. Okay, so that's a long-term thing with the TRCRC.
Okay, that's excellent. So we need this kind of mediators who develop the standards and build capacities of both sides. So these kind of certificates also then, I think, help generate donor interest. They will start asking for projects. Does your project have this? If not, then I'll move elsewhere.
Before that, I think hopefully they can also fund the components of accreditation. Because as you know, accreditation is a long process. It takes, a few 100,000 for developing a small hectare, a couple of hectares. Must include.
In your project design, you cannot just design in terms of the cost of the trees you want to plant. You have to put in all the project costs, right? Including your seedling selection and all this kind of stuff. So you have to, so the project, that's why I mentioned project design. The project design is so important. You have to put all these costs that you have to, certification costs, valuation costs, everything in, so that but it can easily be justified to your donor if it's certifiable. Okay, but in your project design, please include all those costs in.
Just to add to that, we do spend quite a lot of times educating our donors. We have a lot of funders that come in and ask, why is this, and why is that, and why is this, and even though they're not going to fund us, in the end, it's, I think, our responsibility to educate them on the needs to carry out things in this certain way. It's very important, and that's why we say, okay, we're not going to just plant trees for you. You actually have to contribute to the entire ecosystem. I think that's very much, and we cannot just be, I don't want to say bullied, but push to reduce your deliverables just because the funder is not interested to fund you. You need to stand by your principles. Make sure your principles of your project is completed. Otherwise, you're going to be selling yourself short, and then after that, having to struggle and not be able to deliver the project at the end. So be very realistic so that they can then see. Because we have many different projects that had to come back to, it was a big call for proposals. We were not selected, but later on found out that the person that selected didn't have the capacity and then came back to us. And then that just wastes a lot of resources and wastes a lot of time. So just try to be honest as possible to yourself and to the project, because you don't want to detrimentally spoil the goodwill of this action. Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that we have obtained some funds for our remedy framework. Just a brief overview. Our remedy framework is about restoring environmental and social values, restoring them from past conversion activities or past destruction of high conservation values before. So we're very happy to collaborate to run capacity building on why restoration is important and how we can all benefit. I know I represent FSC, but my heart and mind is about protecting Malaysian forests. So we can allocate some funds for capacity building, either for corporates or anybody who's interested in restoration and biodiversity protection as well.
Excellent, excellent. Great to hear that there's all these opportunities rising. I think it's very important that a lot of us spend time and understand and talk to different people, because I think a lot of times those in the conservation sector always just go to conservation seminars. You need to diversify and go to all of these different sort of environments to get to know each other and spend more time. Not so much in going to trying to see all of the meetings, but more time at the coffee table where you then have more time to discuss some of these really key issues. We also have a FSC program that is in Jakarta that we've been invited to. I don't think we've responded yet, but we would like to explore. Thank you. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
maybe a last question or comment, and after that I think we'll have to wrap up this
Okay.
session.
Make sure it's good questions, huh? You're the last one.
I hope so. I hope so. I am Class from ProForest. Dr. Dzaeman, I know you said that try to avoid complexity as much as possible, but try to avoid complexity as much as possible in restoration projects. But sometimes it's hard to do so because a lot of the fragmentation is being caused by agriculture, and say for example, restoration opportunities have been identified in smallholder production landscape. Are there financial mechanisms for them to access in order to participate in this restoration? Because for companies, they have the money to do it, but if we're asking smallholders to give up of the land or towards agroforestry or restoration, then
I think this question will be great for maybe My Farm Tree in Africa and how that worked. I'll pass it over to Riina.
Okay, thank you indeed. The smallholders, when they do restoration, they will be providing kind of public goods, so benefits that we all get in terms of cleaner air, mitigated climate change, biodiversity, and so on. So it's only fair that they are being compensated for that. How this worked in the My Farm Tree project in Kenya and Cameroon. When the project was started, it actually included, I think almost half of the project budget was actually allocated or earmarked as incentives or compensation for farmers to participate in the program and restore, do restoration activities. So then during the project, there's been a lot of effort to actually raise funds from other sources so that it will be sustainable after the project ends. So we have approached, for example, telecom companies because we are using apps, so maybe that's of interest for them as a CSR activity. So that's one example. When we are implementing My Farm Trees in Malaysia, we will also be looking for similar kind of donors who would be interested to take this forward. So.
Paid on a step-by-step process. You collect seeds, and then after that you have a nursery, and at the nursery they can create sales to other components as well. Start kind of small. They can sell seeds, for example, when they're collecting from wild areas, and also when they plant as well and they monitor. So what we try to do is design something that is bite size for different sort of interest groups. Because not everybody wants to suddenly change from managing their oil palm to becoming a full-on restoration practitioner straight away. They might have a little bit, and that could just gain a little bit of interest. So the way that this My Farm Tree is kind of working is trying to develop fragmented components, small bite-sized components where the different communities can get involved in. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And one more thing to add on that. So after the trees have been planted, the farmers are supposed to take photos of the trees about every 6-month intervals. to show that the trees are growing and surviving and have been taken care of. And then based on that, they will be able to receive payments also after the actual planting event, so that there is some incentive for maintenance and some small income or support for the initial years until the trees maybe start to produce some fruits or other products. So that's also a key component, and that is something that's very often forgotten in restoration. We go and plant and then we just forget. And that leads into situation where the more often our trees, planted trees die, the more we actually get to plant and restore, and the more successful we are. So it kind of doesn't make sense. It makes sense to take better care of what we are planting, what we are restoring, and focusing more on the effectiveness. Okay, I think with that we will close this session. Yes, we have a little survey for you for your feedback on the session, and based on the discussion, there's been very lively discussion, a lot of comments, questions, also some resources that have been mentioned that can be useful for sharing. So I think it would be interesting to see how we can continue this discussion. Maybe those who are interested in continuing this discussion and staying in touch can approach us, and we can then keep in touch. At the back as well. Yes. Actually, one of the objectives of the project that we were talking about, the Seed2Tree project, is to set up like a multi-stakeholder platform for identifying topics that are of common interest among restoration actors, and then finding ways how to work on those together. So this is something that could actually continue under such platform. Okay, thank you very much for the active participation. I really enjoyed the questions and the comments. So all the best with your projects, and looking forward to keeping in touch.